Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, amidst of all this Black Friday, Cyber Monday, bargain week, bargain month hype, I'm going to be sharing some tips for how to become a more responsible consumer. Right, before we get started, let me just say that I'm definitely no angel in this. I am not the perfect role model of, the sustainable and ethical consumer, and by no means am I an expert. But a few years ago, I did make the decision to start a journey to become a more responsible consumer. And it definitely has not been an overnight change. It's been a very gradual process to get to the point that I'm at. And I'm still very much embedded in the process. I'm still on my journey, obviously sharing bits and bobs with you guys as I go along. Okie dokie, so my first tip, and this is definitely not going to be new information to you guys, but it is to buy second hand. So I think I started shopping second hand properly maybe about 3, potentially even 4 years ago, and I started sort of dipping a toe into the second hand market. Now, my favourite online marketplace to buy goods secondhand is Vestiaire. And Vestiaire, along with Pinterest, is actually one of the websites and apps on my phone in which I spend the majority of my online time. And over the years, I have bought some amazing things from Vestiaire, from my Saint Laurent navy pea coat, which I bought, when was that, last year or maybe the year before? Love it. To more recently, my Celine So Sangle bag, which of course you guys will be very well acquainted with by now. Now, for anyone who perhaps maybe might not be familiar with Vestiaire, it is essentially an online marketplace for buying and selling luxury goods. So that's the speciality for Vestiaire. It is predominantly luxury goods, although you can sometimes find Zara, Massimo Dutti and that kind of thing on there as well. But for me, luxury goods, it's very much something that I like to invest in and spend my money on. So that is why I always head to Vestiaire. Now, as I mentioned, I spend a lot of time on Vestiaire, and yeah, I make a few purchases, I would say. So I actually have some new items that I've bought over the last month or so to show you guys. Okay, so first item, new Celine. Controversial, some might say, but actually what's inside this little white box of goodness is an old Celine design. So inside the box, got the little card there and little pouch, and it is what inside the pouch. Some of you might have seen this already over on Instagram, and it is the Celine gold knot bracelet, and this is the single knot bracelet. This I have wanted for years, absolute years. I'm not sure of the original release date of the knot collection and this bracelet in particular, but I know it was from the Phoebe era, which is probably why I have such a love for it. Now, this one I got for £180. It's immaculate. It doesn't have any scratches on it, any tarnishing, because of course it is only gold plated. It is just absolutely immaculate. So for buying something which is technically secondhand, but it is still new, I've made quite a good saving on that. And I also bought this and had the direct shipping, which I'm going to touch on again in a minute, but I'm just going to show you my next item, which is inside this dust bag. So you can see the brand there. It's a brand called Nanushka. This is actually my first purchase from Nanushka. I've actually had my eye on the brand for a few years now, but I haven't actually made a purchase before. So this is the Joe bag. It's made of vegan leather, and as you can see, it's got this really beautiful pleated design to it. It's very similar to Zimi Miyake, the Pleats collection, if you've ever seen any of their pieces. It's got that kind of vibe to it, and it's essentially kind of like a shopper, quite a basic one, something you might see as like a reusable shopping bag. And actually I saw this on a luxury retailer, not secondhand, and I added it to my basket because I thought it was quite reasonably priced, even though it's obviously not real leather, which some people would see as a pro, some people will see as a con. But I actually wanted to try out something in vegan leather because I don't have a lot of, specifically marketed vegan leather things. And that's one thing which is really good about Nanushka, is that they do use a lot of vegan leather products. So yeah, I had this in my basket from a luxury retailer, and it was new, £280 new. I left it in my basket because I was just having a ponder over it, and I did think to myself, I could wait for Black Friday and see if there's any discount. Anyway, in my daily searches on Vestiaire, I thought, you know what, I'll have a look, and I'll have a look at Nanushka and see. I haven't searched for Nanushka in a while, and this popped up. Brand new, it hadn't been worn. She'd taken the tags off, but it hadn't been worn. And I managed to get this for £220 and 66 pence, if I remember correctly. Now that is like a £60 saving, which I know some people might think, oh, that's not that great, but £60 is £60. That to me is still quite a lot. And so this was an item which I had new in a basket, but I still managed to find it pre-loved. So that again is for me another prime example of why it's always good and always worthwhile checking Vestiaire before you make a purchase, especially for a premium brand. And then finally, if I can pick up the box, you can see I have quite a love for this brand, can't you? So as you can see from the box design and the logo, what is in this box is old Celine. From the good old Phoebe days, may they rest in peace. And again, this is another reason why I love Vestiaire, because admittedly my loyalty lies with Phoebe and the old Celine days. And of course Vestiaire is now going to be the only place where you can buy these older designs because it's now been taken over. So this is what I purchased. This is the V-neck pump. These are in black velvet, which is a little something different for me. I wouldn't normally go for a velvet shoe, but I saw them. Velvet is more practical than suede because it's much easier to clean. Not quite as practical as leather, but I just thought, do you know what? I'm going to add a little bit of texture to my shoe collection, and I managed to bag these, which I have lusted over for so long. And then I stumbled across these as I like to look just generally at the brand Celine, and I will browse through the Vestiaire pages of Celine and see what they've kind of uploaded on there. I saw these in my size and I thought, you know what? Yes, they are coming to live with me. So I got these for £155. Literally, the girl said they'd been worn once and that I was more than happy with. The insides of the shoes, which is where I often look, especially when it comes to footwear, are immaculate. It's literally just the tiniest bit of wear to this undersole. The heel tip, should I say, looks brand new. So yes, really, really happy with that purchase. So today the average person buys 60% more clothes and keeps them for half as long as they did from 15 years ago. Some of the stats and analytics out there are just mind-boggling and also quite shocking. So essentially, just by buying, for example, let's say a jumper secondhand rather than new, you can actually reduce your environmental impact by up to 81%, which is why it is so good to look at buying secondhand. Now, as I just mentioned when I was showing you guys some of my new in bits that I've purchased from Vestiaire, I used the direct shipping option. I actually used it on all 3 of those items. I don't always use the direct shipping option. I'll explain a little bit about it. So essentially Vestiaire, they have an authentication process, which is why their speciality is luxury goods. However, there is a range of goods sold on Vestiaire, and there are some things which admittedly don't need an authentication process. So the direct shipping method is actually something that they introduced, I would want to say maybe a year or 2 ago. It's definitely a more recent development for Vestiaire, and that essentially means that the item is shipped directly to you. So Vestiaire have launched a campaign for this Black Friday, and it's called #BetterBlackFriday. So you can search that on any social channels, get involved, share your Vestiaire purchases, your secondhand purchases if you've bought any recently, and spread that message of buying secondhand and encouraging people to look at buying secondhand more. And also, as part of this campaign, Vestiaire have donated €10,000 to The Circle to help fund their campaign to support garment workers in Asia, which is excellent. Now on to my second tip, which is to research the brands that you're buying from and educate yourselves on the impact of your consumerism on your buying habits, on both the environment and on humanity. Right, so there are loads, in fact there is a plethora, if you will, of resources out there available at your disposal to learn more about the impacts of your consumerism on the environment and on humanity. Now, I could ramble on for ages. I could list so many, but I'm just going to list a handful to get you guys started if you haven't already. Right, so first things first, because we all love Netflix, and I don't know about you guys, but I love a good documentary. But there are a few documentaries both available on Netflix, and I think some might be available elsewhere. YouTube is also a really good place to kind of get environmental style documentaries as well. The first one that I would definitely advise you watch, and this is a Netflix, or it's available on Netflix, and it's The True Cost. So that is number one, top of your list to watch, The True Cost. And as the title very much suggests, it dives into the true cost of fashion on the environment and other factors, and it's quite an eye-opening one, so that's why I always advise you start with that one first. Another one is Minimalism, and we've also got Riverblue and The Machinists. The Machinists is actually from 2010, but still a really good documentary to watch. And again, as the title suggests, it's about garment workers, it's about the machinists, the people who actually make your clothes. And moving on to apps, because of course we all live on our phones. So I'm just going to mention one app which I would 110% recommend that you download, and it's called Good On You, the Good On You app. And I've spoken about this one before. I think I might have mentioned it in the knitwear video that I did a couple of weeks ago. It's a great app. It's basically a brand reviewing app, and this team of people who run the Good On You app essentially dive into and do all of the legwork and research so that we don't have to, and it's just a really useful resource. So what you can do on there, if you're a bit curious, if you've got any brands that you currently shop with, you can type those into the search bar and you can see how they score. I also personally found and sort of stumbled across some really cool brands through the app, because when you click on a brand, if perhaps it doesn't score very highly, it gives you an option of other similar alternatives, and you can scroll through that list and it will show them all the way from great to, well, the worst kind of category, which is avoid. So it gives you really good alternatives if perhaps you're shopping with brands that are in those lower end of the review scales. Podcasts, because we're in a modern world. I love podcasts. I just love them. And again, I could list off so many. We'd be sat here for years with me waffling on, listing off all these resources. But the first podcast that I would recommend, and this is just one that I personally really enjoy because I found it quite relatable. It's a British podcast and it's called Sustainably Influenced. And it's hosted by Bianca Foley and Charlotte Williams, who are, and I think this is why I find it quite relatable, who are two British influencers, and they are essentially sharing their own journeys, and they have guests as well that come on to give their take on various different elements from within, fashion and lifestyle even as well. And I just think it's very realistic, it's very honest as well, which I very much appreciate, and it's not preachy. So yeah, I would definitely recommend downloading the Sustainably Influenced podcast. There's quite a few episodes, but I think that they're quite short and sweet. They're not the sort of podcast that waffle on for hours and hours and hours, so it's definitely a good one to get yourself started on. And then of course, books. Like actual real life books. They still exist, kids of today. This is Fashionopolis by Dana Thomas. I bought this right at the start of the first lockdown, and I'd heard really good things about this book, so I thought, you know what, yes, I would like an actual physical book that I can sit in my chair and I can have a good read and really sink my teeth into. There's a lot of information in this book, but I really like the way that it's written. There are some kind of preachy sides, but it's also written from a point of view of, like, it almost seems like Dana Thomas is learning as she's going along, which I really appreciate, because it almost feels like it's me learning along with her. And within this book, she highlights major devastating events like what happened at Rana Plaza. She also highlights and sort of tells the story of brands that have made such a dramatic transition. Levi's, for example, is one that's featured within this book, and it tells that really interesting transition between these kind of two eras, which is very interesting because it brings us to modern day and how a lot of brands operate today and how things are made, you know, all in these cheaper factories. So this is definitely a book that I would suggest in whatever format that you like, reading or listening to books. Definitely one that I would suggest and give a really big thumbs up as well. So admittedly, the educating myself and learning portion of this tip and of my journey has definitely been the hardest. It's been a bit of a bitter pill to swallow, I would say, and I'm still very much embedded in this process. By no means has my learning finished. I've still got improvements I can 110% make. They're just not things, as I've already addressed, not things that I can necessarily make immediately and overnight. It's a gradual process. Right, now my third tip, and I know this is a message which is very prominent and spread about a lot, and for good reason, it's to buy less, to save up for longer, and to buy better quality. Buying better quality, as strange as it sounds, but it will actually save you money in the long run. If I just use a basic t-shirt for an example, you can get basic t-shirts, and I think I spoke about this in one of my previous videos, but you can get a basic t-shirt for as little as £3. You can probably get them for even less from some retailers, but for £3, let's say you then have something more of a mid kind of price, maybe £12, then you can go upwards and upwards and upwards from there. I'm not saying the t-shirt that costs £60 is the best quality. Again, it comes down to that point I've mentioned previously of researching the brands, researching what you're buying, researching the fibres used in that t-shirt. You know, there's a lot of different elements that all come into it, but buying a better quality t-shirt that won't just fall apart or get holes in after a few washes or even after one season, it will save you money in the long run because it lasts you longer, so therefore it doesn't need replacing. I think for a lot of us, myself included, especially in the past, I've 100% done this, but you can get blinded by super cheap prices and they can be very, very appealing, and where you could just save up for a little bit longer and buy one really good quality item, sometimes the temptation is just too real to spend the same amount and buy several items. And I think sometimes we just have to think really carefully before we buy and ask yourself, do I need this? Which takes me on to, it was a nice little segue, wasn't it? My fourth tip, which is always stick to your list. Right, so you lot know I love a list. In fact, me and Debs had, I reckon it was about a 20-minute conversation on the phone the other day about list making, and we just expressed basically our love for making lists. That's the kind of friendship that we have. We talk about list making. But if you yourself are a list maker, you'll know the passion that we share about making a good list. Now, there's a lot to be said about making a list, and I have definitely mentioned this in some of my other videos. I myself have a list for the items that I want to either buy or upgrade in my wardrobe, and what I do on this list is I add in, it may even sometimes be specific, very specific products. So for example, I want to find this Celine bag. I have many Celine bags on my wish list, let me tell you. Now, one additional bit of advice that I would give if you're kind of going forward with this method of list making for your wardrobe is to add these items to your list, especially when you've done your wardrobe clear out or you're having a little wardrobe assessment. Have these items on your list and then to leave them. Don't go out and impulsively purchase them just because they're on your list, but just leave them. It could be a few days, it could be a few weeks, could be a few months even, because it's kind of like having a virtual wardrobe. It's almost having those items as if you already own them. So I go back to this list and I look at every single item on there and I think, does it still make me feel the same way? Does it still make me think, oh yes, I really want that. I wish I could wear that today. I wish I already had that in my wardrobe. If it doesn't, then those things can be removed off your list. So essentially, it's saving you money and saving you time searching out for these items, and it's just making you think. And I think that's the general takeaway from all of this, you know, this video in general, is to just think a bit more about your purchases. It's something I've had to train myself to do because I was a very, very impulsive purchaser. I would be see it, want it, bought it, all within a matter of seconds. So it's just a more considered process of thinking about what you're buying before you actually hit that buy button. And there's never been a more important time to stick to these lists than now, the sales period. Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Cyber Week, Cyber Fortnight, Cyber Month in some cases I've heard brands refer to it as. So if you find yourself being bombarded, I had this situation the other day where I was just sat innocently watching television. I had a notification from a retailer pop up on my phone. It was a luxury retailer saying 40% off. I immediately went straight to that laptop. I was browsing for ages, for at least a good 2 hours. And halfway through, I thought to myself, hang on a minute, I've just got carried away. This 40% off was like music to my ears, because for luxury brands, that's going to be quite a chunk of money. And in your head, you process it as, God, I'm saving all that money. But actually, if it's something you never wanted in the first place, you're just wasting money. So it goes back to that thought process of, do I really need this? Would I have bought this full price? Which I think is always something that's good to bear in mind. If not, step away from the laptop or whatever digital device you may be shopping on. Right guys, so that is it from me for today's video. I just wanted to, in amongst all this sale hype, I just wanted to kind of make a video that perhaps just had a little bit more substance behind it, and hopefully would have a bit more of a positive impact as well at the same time. I would really like to get into making more of these videos, and I'd love it if you guys could use the comments to speak up. I know sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to comment publicly, but if you do want to hear more about, you know, like perhaps my sustainable and like journey to becoming more of a responsible consumer, then let me know down in the comments, because that's all we have to go off, as you know, in terms of feedback from you guys, is those comments. So please do speak up and let me know if you want to hear more, if you want to hear more of my recommendations for all of those, you know, podcasts, books, documentaries, all of that kind of thing. Just leave all those down below in the comment section. And yes, that's it from me for today. So thank you as always for coming and spending however many minutes of your day watching me waffle on as usual. And yes, I hope you all have or have had a really good weekend, and I will see you all next time.